Can't believe we have to do this, but TikTok keeps giving us shit for misinformation. So here we go. This week, as we start to cover the Planet of the Apes franchise, we felt it necessary to add a little extra disclaimer. Just like we do with most of our subjects, we plan to draw on real-life events to try and make the movie sound as much like a real-life event as possible. Because of that, over the next few weeks, we'll be drawing on our experience throughout lockdown and the COVID-19 pandemic as the source for the film franchise's Simian Flu. We would like to stress, this is a purely fictional mockumentary-style podcast. We in no way believe that COVID was the result of ape experimentation or any of the fictional conspiracy theories we are about to attach to the story. The Simian Flu is a fictional virus intended to move the narrative of the Planet of the Apes forward, and we are in no way trying to spread misinformation on the stress, trauma, illness and heartache brought on by the COVID-19 virus, which we all lived through not so long ago. With that in mind, sit back, relax, and listen as we try to take on our most ambitious subject yet. But be warned, if you think this week is controversial, then you better stay away next week too, because that one's gonna rub some people up the wrong way. Well, sure, fuck them, right? Hit the spoiler warning.
Warning, this podcast contains heavy spoilers for not just one movie, but entire franchises. We highly recommend going and watching these movies before listening to us as a companion piece that stitches all the timelines into one creepy, crime-ridden story. There will be no more spoiler warnings. We do not break character. After this, there is no turning back. You've been warned. Hit the music.
You are talking about the nonsensical ravings of a lunatic mind.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
It's alive! It's
Hello and welcome to It's Alive Alive Podcast. This is a true crime, paranormal, interstellar podcast covering unbelievable stories that sound like they were ripped straight from the pages of a Hollywood script. I'm your host, the man of many names, the outlaw Harley Ray, the bruiser, Bronson, Dr. HR, Smoking Steam, THC, or you can call me Josh for short. And with me, as always, is my very own Scream Queen, the perfect combination of beauty and brains, the bride of Smoking Steam, the India hard expert, the guts and gore, the gorgeous, the sexy Aimee Rose, and I am on fucking form.
You are.
Yeah.
In fairness.
That's because I'm excited.
I know you are. I can't wait to get this out of your mouth.
Anyway, tell the truth, lockdown was like the best 2 years of your life, right? I spent the whole time being a cowboy. Most of the time I spent outdoors. It's like literally the most time I spent outdoors in my life. Virtual outside, but that's as far as I was legally allowed to go.
Yep, I was a witcher.
I mean, if we had thought about it at the time, we probably could have, spent the time better getting this show on the road, but I hadn't had this idea yet.
Yep, we were about to get lost in the crowd at the time, in fairness. I mean, everyone was podcasting, YouTubing, Twitching and camming around then, trying to find a way to fill the time, I suppose, and make a buck in the process.
Instead, we just altered days playing Xbox. One day I'd play Red Dead Redemption 2 and you'd mind the kids, and the next day I'd watch the kids and you'd play The Witcher. Then we all got vaccinated and that was the end of that vacation. And I'll tell you, being a man in his mid-30s in the real world, you don't get to play Xbox like that anymore. Actually, that's probably the last real game I've had the time to play all the way through.
Yeah, but if you just do it like me and you play like a half an hour a day and you get one mission done, it takes longer, but eventually you'll get it finished. But what stopped me doing that was we got fucking Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and that loading time took up 90% of that half an hour. But if I thought about it, I'd load it first.
But that's it. And I'm a binger when it comes to games. So I'll find one and I'll get sucked into it, like with Red Dead. Just get absolutely, and all my focus goes on. I can't do anything else until I have this flattened. So I find you're in lockdown, but I mean, these days, there's no way I could fucking do it. I just don't have the time. I can't sit down. If I sit down and start the game, that's me gone for the day.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And that's not why our episodes are late.
No, you never play it.
Never anymore. I mean, the odd time now, if I do get a chance to play, it'll be like a quick run in and maybe play like a game of AEW with fucking the lads, quick wrestling match and then back out the door again.
That's why I like Crusader Kings.
Or
you just set up like your shit and then maybe fast forward a year, see how things are going, tweak some stuff, and then I can come back again tomorrow and
Yeah. So instead of games, I decided to go and be alive.
Yeah, but you still get a similar like satisfaction finishing an episode and then posting it to finishing a game. Like in process, it's similar. All the levels need to be done to complete the game, but then the idea, the research, the outline, script, record, edit, post, and promote, like that's similar.
I actually get a bit of an anticlimax in that regard. I always feel a rush finishing the script, right? But once I post the episode, I realise I'm done with the subject that's consumed my life for a few weeks and have to start right back at square one again. So that feeling is short-lived for me. Like, so it's now this point here when I'm about to fucking spew out everything that I have read and looked into, and fuck me, I've done a lot for this one.
I know you have.
That's the fun for me. As soon as we start recording, then I'm kind of like, that's when I've had my fun. When I posted it, it's literally like, okay, I'm back to point one now. Start again. Go.
I get you.
And even this week, I got that feeling as soon as I finished the script because I was so buzzing to get into part two that it was like no sooner did I finish writing the first part, I was sitting there outlining part two, and I was just like, fucking, let's go.
Do you think that you just have like an addictive personality? That you're hooked on games, like, and hooked on subjects?
I'm a mediaholic. I don't know if they have a program or meeting for that, but it definitely helped me when we were in lockdown in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
And that's today's subject. This week, we will take a look at the Simian Flu pandemic that saw the whole world shut down and led to various doomsday apocalyptic theories. Then next week, we'll explore the controversial celebrity religion apology, its source, its dogma, its structure, and its leadership.
Definitely won't solve for that later.
Yeah, well, that's next week's problem. This week we start with the Simian Flu virus, or ALZ113 as it's known scientifically, and how it nearly took down the human race before being stolen for use by doomsday conspiracists such as the apes we're going to talk about next week.
Patreon is alive, alive, live, alive, live, alive. Patreon is alive, alive, horror podcast. Patreon is alive, alive, live, alive, live, alive. Patreon is alive, alive, horror podcast.
Hey kids, can't get enough of that blood, guts and gore? Then head on over to our Patreon, where for just $5 a month you'll get exclusive access to our true crime show Real Monsters and horrific history tales from Playing with Bones with Aimee Rose, along with early access to our minisodes and ad-free access to everything else. All this and loads more horror-tastic extras from the Horrorverse. So what are you waiting for? Permission? Go nick your parents' card today and subscribe now at patreon.com/It's Alive Alive Pod. Remember, that's It's Alive Alive Podcast, a really, really fake true crime horror podcast. It's Alive Alive, all the guts and gore with none of the guilt.
So in and around the end of 2019, word of a virus started to do the rounds, originating from a lab in California called GEN-SYS Laboratories. The virus, which was airborne and potentially deadly, covered the world in a matter of months, and by March of 2020, the whole world was put on lockdown. Now, I don't think I need to remind everyone, but the lockdown measures included no going outside unless for essential items, that being medicine, food, and cleaning supplies, to which it was advised you do as a supply run every second week as opposed to weekly shops, as was normal in the before time. Contact with people outside your immediate family was prohibited, outside of, again, essential situations. And in those situations, people needed to stand at a 6-foot distance from one another and wear masks to try and slow the spread of the airborne disease. Hand sanitizer was also strongly encouraged and used after touching any and all surfaces, specifically before or after touching your own face. Even as things got better and improved, social bubbles became a thing, and small groups of close friends or family who were symptom-free or vaccinated could meet in social distance masked circumstances. But how bad was it really? How close, if at all, did we come to complete and total annihilation, and what was the true cause of it all? To get into that, we have to look at what was going on at GEN-SYS Laboratories pre-pandemic. GEN-SYS was one of the world's leading pharmaceutical and biotech research and manufacturing companies at the time, leading the way in neurological disease management and prevention. In fact, this whole pandemic stems from their Alzheimer's research, and a strain of medication which seemed at first to not just cure the disease, but also restore and in some cases improve the previously damaged mind of the afflicted subject.
Obviously, we're all very aware of the GEN-SYS company after the pandemic, but they had been in the news a lot of years previous to the Simian Flu breakout. They were a regular target for eco-terrorists, animal rights groups, and in a few cases, hardcore conspiracists. All this came from their use of animals, and in particular apes, as test subjects for their research.
Unfortunately, a cross they had to bear throughout history due to their place on the evolutionary ladder. Being so close to us physically and biologically put them first in line day one as test subjects or guinea pigs in all pre-human testing. Basically, everything was tested on an ape before man to see what danger or side effects could be present before releasing it for human testing.
Early chimpanzee experiments ran the gamut, from infecting them with virtually every infectious agent known to using them in head crash and trauma studies or as unwilling donors for organ transplants. Chimpanzees were irradiated to see the effects on their bodies, injected with brain tissue from patients with schizophrenia and multiple sclerosis, or with pulverized brain tissue from humans who died from Kuru. Infant chimpanzees were even separated from their mothers and put in isolation chambers to observe their responses. Few limits, if any at all, were placed on what was done to them by scientists.
Chimpanzees have suffered many invasive procedures, including some which removed or destroyed portions of their brains to test brain function, killed them and removed their organs, heart, kidneys, livers, to be used for human transplants, all of which failed, exposed them to huge doses of radiation causing significant damage, castrated and removed their pituitary glands, followed by hormonal analysis and placing electrodes into their brains. Easy for me to fucking say. Shit.
Chimps were used extensively by Fred Colston, a toxicologist, to study chemical carcinogens. A 1979 grant by the National Institutes of Health described how the project would subject chimpanzees to various carcinogens, radiation, and oncogenic viruses. Large doses of interferons, which are proteins derived from human cells which have antiviral properties, were administered to chimpanzees to test side effects and toxicity. Alcohol was infused into chimpanzees inoculated with hepatitis B to test whether it would induce liver damage. Then there's all the space program research going on. Chimpanzees have been subjected to severe physical trauma and killed by the US Air Force for air and space travel research. They were crashed at supersonic speeds, burned in wind blast experiments, and spun in centrifuges. In separate experiments, researchers subjected chimpanzees to severe head trauma, high impact, and whiplash. Others exposed them to adverse conditions like rapid decompression to a state of near vacuum or gravitational forces while submerged in water.
That is fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of Enos the space chimp? He was the second ape sent to space. The first was Ham. Boy, that was a quick trip up and down. Enos had a lot more to do. I found this article about him on the National Air and Space Museum website. Cool. So this article is called Enos the Forgotten Chimp. Fucking forgotten chip. The forgotten
rolled
chip.
Under the oven.
From November 29th, 2021, and was written by Michael Neufeld, who is a senior curator in the museum's space history department and is responsible for Mercury and Gemini spacecraft, among other collections.
Okay.
So a reputable source.
Yes.
On November 29th, 1961, Enos became the first chimpanzee to orbit the Earth. He flew on NASA's Mercury Atlas V mission, which the relatively new space agency deemed necessary before orbiting an astronaut in a Mercury capsule. But Enos is little remembered today. Ham, his compatriot from the US Air Force's chimp training facility in New Mexico, overshadows him. Launched on Mercury Redstone 2 on January 31st, 1961, Ham made a publicity splash after NASA stipulated his short suborbital trip, which NASA's required before the United States could put its first person in space.
Is Ham the guy that the picture? Did you know him in a spacesuit?
I'm not 100% sure. Not to sound racist, but all the monkeys look alike to me. All those little monkeys.
The chimps?
Yeah, they all look alike to me.
Yeah.
When the chimps fucking overrun us and they take over the world, I hope they don't hear me say that. Doctors had a lot of exaggerated concerns about the impact of spaceflight on the human body and psyche. Engineers wanted to prove the safety of the Mercury capsule. Ham, who was visibly agitated by his rough flight and by the flashing press cameras afterwards, became a celebrity. By the time Enos flew, the US once again was embarrassingly behind the Soviet Union in spaceflight spectaculars. 2 cosmonauts, ooh, that's a nice way of saying it, had circled the Earth that year. Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space, and German Titov, that's right? Who had orbited... Titov, just Titov.
Yeah, that would totally be an insult in Ireland.
Who had orbited for a full day in August 1961. 2 American astronauts, Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom. Gus Grissom, that sounds like an astronaut too, doesn't it?
Sounds like a serial killer.
Had also gone into space, but they had only made short suborbital journeys like Ham. When they say suborbital, I imagine it's like the guy that did that Red Bull jump.
Yeah, it's under,
it's
like
kind of
just
like
outside, like the
basically on the edge of space, like.
Yeah, you're not getting pulled out just yet.
You're
like,
still in the Earth's gravitational pull.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right.
You'd have to be, wouldn't you? Would you in that
well, like
you'd have to, or else you're just
jump,
floating off,
you could see space behind him, like. If I'm remembering it right.
I
could be
was watching
this.
a video this week of this woman going up like for her first time, and it was one of those kind of trend now to like be practicing my pretty smile or my soft smile for my wedding day, and then like they post a picture of their actual smile from the wedding day, and it's really ugly.
Yeah.
And her one was practicing my soft smile for when I see the Earth from space for the first time, and then she posted actual footage. And like it was crazy, like I mean, like she had no shame because it was just amazing. It was like,
I imagine it
crying face all over the place, but like she just couldn't stop. 100%. Like
I imagine, I feel like I would run through a number of different emotions very quickly.
Yeah,
I'd be overwhelmed.
I think it'd be tears straight away from me.
I'd be overwhelmed looking at it. Then I think I'd get extremely claustrophobic for a minute, realizing how small I was.
You were, yeah.
And looking around at that, I think once I took my attention away from Earth and started looking at the space around me, I think that's when I'd start to feel a bit claustrophobic. So I always said that, I think I said it to Riley before and he couldn't understand what I meant by it. I was like, if I was stuck in a desert, you could feel claustrophobic. Yeah. And he's like, what do you mean? That's got nothing but open space. And I was like, yeah, but you don't see an end.
Is that the idea of liminal spaces? Like, is that the idea of liminal spaces?
I don't know, I've never heard of that before. But yeah, you can feel claustrophobic in extreme open space. Like, I mean, like, if you get stuck in a snowstorm, it's supposed to be one of the worst. Because you're blinded by it. Everything's just white. So everything in front of you is just white. So it's claustrophobic. You're fucking, entombed in this fucking snow.
Exactly.
But you're not really. You're still able to move. But I imagine it would be the same feeling in a desert where you're looking into, like, just into the fucking distance, and you can see nothing. Yeah. Nothing for miles and 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 miles. That's the exact same thing as being locked in a fucking box. Do you know?
It is, yeah.
Because there's no end to it. So I imagine that being in space could be a claustrophobic feeling, like, for a minute, and that's crazy because it's the complete opposite again. Because that is literally nothing but space. You know? Yeah. During the first launch attempt that year, 13 days after, what did you say his name was? Gagarin. That makes more sense. Anyway, after Gagarin's triumphant mission on April 12, 1961, the range safety officer blew up the uncrewed Mercury Atlas 3 when the rocket's guidance system failed. Fortunately, the launch escape system salvaged the Mercury capsule, which was reflown successfully on Mercury Atlas 4 in mid-September. The spacecraft carried a spaceman simulator, a device to test the cabin environmental control system. It is fucking mental that they had all this back in the 60s and we only got fucking the internet in like the 90s. I mean, fuck me. If you can do a spaceman simulator in space, you bastards, you had this information and you've been holding back and you were holding out on us. They've had it since Roswell. I know they've had it since Roswell, dickheads. The question then became, could an astronaut fly on the next mission, MA5, which would be Mercury Atlas 5, yeah? At least then the United States could orbit someone in the same year as the Soviets. So then Russia kept beating these guys up there. Do you think it was because Russia was just like, fuck it, send the rocket up. If they die, they die.
Yeah.
Caution once again prevailed as NASA's confidence in the capsule and the rocket were not very high. The MA4 flight was worked, but there were numerous technical problems with the spacecraft and the boosters that needed investigating and fixing, delaying the next mission. Doctors were also still worried about the effects of extended weightlessness on an astronaut, and the engineers wanted another test of the cabin environment. Despite questions from the press and and from the Office of NASA Administrator James Webb, Project Mercury officials under Robert Gilruth confirmed that MA5 would be a chimp flight. In October 1961, personnel from Holloman Air Force Base near Alamogordo, New Mexico, brought 3 more chimpanzees to Cape Canaveral to join 2 already there. See, we need to stick with doing stories about America. I can say American place names because I've watched wrestling for so long. I have heard them being introduced. All the wrestlers' fucking addresses being get laid. I was like, from this place, this place. So these names are easy for me. I mean, Alamogordo would have caught me if that was actually Mexico. One of the new arrivals was Enos, a native of Cameroon in West Central Africa, who had been purchased by the Air Force from the Florida Wildlife Center in 1960. The chief veterinarian described him as quite a cool guy and not a performing type at all. Technical problems pushed the launch back several weeks. 3 days before the new target date, November 29, 1961, the Air Force team designated Enos as the prime candidate for NASA's mission, with several of his compatriots as backups. 90 minutes before the planned launch time, he was inserted into the Mercury spacecraft inside his pressurized primate capsule. Launch day was trying, with 2.5 hours of delays, in part caused by the pad crew's mistakes. NASA mission director Walt Williams, not known for his even temper, became so angry he left the Mercury control building and drove to the launch complex to impress on the crew. I love that.
Oh my god, I thought you were going to say that he left to impress the crew.
Impress on the crew the need for care as well as speed. Impress on the crew, he went down, gave him an awful bollock. Finally, at 10:08 a.m., the Atlas lifted off and 5 minutes later injected the MA5 capsule into an orbit of 99 miles by 147 miles. I don't know what the fuck that means. Enos experienced G-forces of nearly 8 times Earth's gravity before the rocket burnt out. Fucking hell. Jesus. No, he was weightless, but strapped tightly inside his box. Because a weightless monkey in a fucking... that would have been hilarious. Yeah. In front of Enos, I will say, I read this story, and when I got to this part, this is what impressed me. This part really fucking impressed me. When you get to the end, then you'll know why. Okay. In front of Enos were 3 levers and several lights. Because he was to fly a 3-orbit mission lasting nearly 5 hours, the prime objective of an astronaut in Project Mercury, he had a more elaborate set of cognitive tests than Ham, whose suborbital flight lasted 18 minutes. Enos had 4 different problems to solve, such as pulling levers to turning off lights. The problem cycle lasted 12 minutes, followed by 6 minutes of rest. One task provided a chance, if performed correctly, to get a drink of water. Another, a banana pellet. The other 2 problems had a punishment for mistakes. A mild, at least that's what his trainers described it as, electrical shock on his left foot. But, and I think this really shows the ape's intelligence and perseverance, that system began to malfunction on the 4th problem, with the result that he was shocked every time he pulled on the central lever, whether he was correct or not. He ended up being shocked dozens of times in a row, yet kept working as trained.
It's mad. Clever monkey. Ape. Ooh.
Yeah. Anyway, meanwhile, problems began to pile up with the Mercury capsule after a smooth first orbit. The environmental control system began to overheat. Eventually, Enos's body temperature rose to 100.5 Fahrenheit. That's 38 degrees for us European people.
That's a fever.
Before stabilizing. Ground controllers also began to notice excessive fuel usage in the attitude control system. I assume that's altitude control. That ship's got a bit of an attitude change. Adjust the attitude control system. Oh, if we had that in the kids, that would be amazing.
They needed that for that house. The HAL 2000, HAL 3000, HAL 1000 in the
Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors.
Yeah, parody.
That one actually creeped me out a little bit, to be honest with you. And that was with Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, that did creep me out.
That really creeped me out when I was a kid, watching that episode.
Do you know what I found extremely, extremely unsettling? I can't remember which Treehouse of Horrors it was, but you remember the haunted house that would rather kill itself than them? But like, do you know that little kind of pop that that imploded, it kind of sucked it in. Yeah. That didn't sit right with me when I was younger. I didn't like it. It made me feel extremely uncomfortable.
Or was that just the Family Guy version of the Poltergeist?
No, something happens.
Does the house disappear in that as well?
I think so, doesn't it?
I can't remember. Anyway, due to failed thrusters, the capsule would drift until the automated system would fire other jets to put the spacecraft back into a programmed altitude. God damn it. The cycle kept repeating, with the end of the second orbit approaching and only seconds to spare to get the spacecraft down into the Atlantic Ocean landing area. Flight director Christopher Kraft told the Point Arguello, California ground station to fire the retro rockets. Because, you know, the old retro rockets. They'll be the good ones. Got them at the vintage
more expensive one.
There's a little bit of rust on the side just to give it a bit of personality. Yeah. That's the retro rocket. A recovery aircraft spotted the capsule descending on its parachute and circled it until a Navy ship came to pick it up. After another delay, U.S. Navy seamen finally got aboard, fired the explosive hatch, and extracted Enos from his box. But he had become angry and frustrated at the 3-hour wait and had broken out of his restraints inside the box, ripped off his medical sensors, and pulled out his urinary catheter.
That's a fair enough reaction, though.
Well, yeah, if you left me in a fucking capsule for fucking 3 hours in the middle of the ocean with a fucking tube
Look
up
at
my
what
dick,
I just achieved for you the last few fucking hours.
Oh, it doesn't. It gets worse for him. No, not in that way. No, it wasn't that way. But not in that way. But he didn't exactly get a whole lot of fame for it. Afterwards, he returned to his usual calm and self and enjoyed some fresh fruit after many hours of only water and banana pellets. But his experience had been bad enough that NASA was not very frank with the press about what had happened. Enos' celebrity was brief. At the post-flight news conference, Bob Gilruth announced that John Glenn was the prime pilot for Mercury Atlas 6, with Scott Carpenter as his backup. So these two came in and fucking stole Enos' thunder.
Okay.
Media attention quickly became focused on when Glenn would launch. Enos went home to the Holloman facility but died a year later of a severe form of dysentery unresponsive to antibiotics. After an autopsy, his body was supposedly sent to the Smithsonian, but no trace of what happened to it has been found. He was a pioneer for the human space travel, but one might well question the necessity of his sacrifice today.
If that's not enough for you, there were programs in place at one time to try and get chimps to talk.
No way, like the butler from Umbrella Academy.
Yeah, oh my god, I'd like that, but no. I assume that was the dream ending for the researchers that were working on it. The first of these sorts of projects took place in the 1930s and 1950s, with 2 female chimps, Gua and Vicky, being raised as part of a human family and taught spoken language. These 2 projects failed with the inability of the chimps to produce spoken language, although there were some evidence of understanding. It was suggested at this point that apes would never be able to produce spoken language due to their different vocal anatomy, and later projects focused on teaching a modified version of American Sign Language, or ASL.
Hold on 1 minute. I talk to our dog Caesar all the fucking time. And yes, Caesar was named after the ape we're going to talk about today. And I'm hoping he won't come running to me every time I'd say that fucking name today. But he seems cool at the moment.
He's fast.
But I talk to that dog all the time, and he seems to understand what I'm saying. He knows when I tell him where to go. He knows what to do. He follows commands. Obviously, if the fucking monkeys or the apes were brought up around people from day one, they will act like the people around them. When we had a kitten that was born in this house and grew up only around 2 dogs, that kitten didn't act like a cat. It wasn't like stuck up like a cat. No, it was really like cuddly and acted like a dog and just played with you and wanted to just cuddle up with you and fucking lick your face all day. It thought it was a fucking dog because all it did was spend time with dogs.
And you know what? That crossed my mind about Caesar today, because he's the first dog now that we've had for a while that wasn't the only dog in the house. But the thing is, he goes up on his back legs more naturally, more easily than like dogs that we've had before. Like, and I wonder, is it just kind of,
Is he taking after his namesake and evolving?
Maybe, or does he think he's a human? It's kind of, you know,
pups together strong.
So the ASL use of the ASL avoided the problem of speech production and was also thought to overlap with natural gesturing of primates in the wild. One potential argument for the failure of apes and other primates to deal with this complexity is the memory load involved. However, modified techniques such as using plastic symbols with Sarah the chimpanzee or using a visual display of symbols on a computer screen did not greatly improve structural understanding. Apart from this obvious difficulty, there were several other indications that apes did not really get language. Many of the primates did not use language spontaneously. Even in examples where they did, they used it simply to acquire something such as food or hug. This is in contrast with young human children who, although they use language to request things, also talk or sign simply to interact, to be social, and to alert someone to something interesting. Other issues that arose with projects were the tendency of experimenters to over-interpret the performance of the given ape and how much of the signing performed by apes involved repetition of signs that the experimenter had just produced. It's now generally accepted that apes and other non-human primates cannot acquire language and that the major stumbling block is structural complexity.
So this kind of falls in, because when you read this earlier on in the week, you were like, but that one with Robin Williams definitely was reacting to it. But what they're not saying that they wouldn't look, but the apes obviously like getting hugged by the sound of things. Yeah. So obviously if it had some bit of a bond with you, and you can bond with an animal, that's definite. So if it had a bond with him and saw him, it would look for a hug.
There is that level of understanding. I really do believe that. I saw this video of this woman, and it does the rounds. And she's at the zoo, and she's there with her baby, and she's I think it was the orangutan. So there's the glass. And next thing it was obviously the mother orangutan. She looks at the baby, she kind of taps at the glass. The next thing she kind of goes off for a second and comes back with her baby, and she's comparing babies nearly.
Come here, you can see it in animals' faces. They know. There's some. I mean, obviously they don't know what to, but when it comes to them, I mean, they do have, they're on our evolutionary scale. I mean, they're there at some stage. And you say that there's
bonobo chimp is our closest.
And what ones did you say have hit their stone age? Weren't you saying that about some wild apes have hit their stone age?
I think it's chimps. They've come into, like, they're using their stone tools. That is their stone age. That's not to be confused with the stoned ape theory, though.
Oh, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so the stoned ape theory, it's basically that humans evolved.
Actually, hold up. Let's leave that as a cliffhanger for next week.
Okay, cool.
I think that would suit next week, because next week's a little bit more conspiracy, and if we're going to be doing a mushroom talk, we'll do it in that show. It's as down to earth as possible. But it's crazy that when we say like that, we can see it in their faces how fucking human-like they are, and that they are on our fucking scale. And that even to say that they're in their stone age, we're taking these things that are in their stone age, and they're still, to this day, being used to test the toxicity of insecticides, chemicals, and in, like our case today, pharmaceutical drugs.
Apparently, we got to start worrying when they learn how to set bones. That's when you know that there's a spark of like social intelligence.
Watch out for that again. Yeah, you're starting to lead more into next week's topic.
No, but this is true. This is fact, like.
So is next week's topic, Aimee?
No, but as in this is like actual research. As in this isn't. I'm saying this isn't a conspiracy theory that I'm telling you. This is an actual. I'm not saying that.
I know. I just think it'll fit better in what we're talking about next week. That's all.
I just can't wait for next week.
So while today's subject does deal with the cause of the Simian Flu pandemic, we will be focusing more on its effects on its original test subjects rather than the overall effect it had on humanity. And if we have time, we might get a chance to look at some of the crazy doomsday conspiracy attached to the pandemic, the GEN-SYS labs, and the expected fall of the government and mankind as told by scientists and soldier whistleblowers in their many books and YouTube shows. But to be honest, you're looking at what we got to deal with today. That might be next week's problem again. Now, while GEN-SYS may be a big evil corporation, that doesn't mean that all employees that work there are by default also evil. This isn't the Death Star, so to the most part, the scientists who work there were working for the betterment of man and to cure disease and suffering in every way they possibly could. And although they get shit for the types of experiments they run on the apes, the general treatment of the animals was not that of neglect. In other words, the place was up to code. They were fed the correct food, given a clean cage with fresh straw every day. They were exercised, and handlers were on staff to make sure the apes were treated with care and given the correct amount of stimulation.
No amount of stimulation they can provide will match the ape's natural habitat. It's disgusting that any type of experimentation goes on with animals anymore, let alone ones that resemble us so much. Can you imagine looking into the chimp's face with all that life and expression? Like, you might as well have a small child in the lab with you.
From that documentary you were telling me about with the horses, it reminds me, treatment like that's still going on, kind of.
Absolutely.
Seems absolutely crazy. Do you want to tell them about that? Yeah. Just people outside of Ireland wouldn't know about that documentary.
No. So RTE did an expose on it, and they basically went undercover, and this place that had been involved with Sharon Shannon, I don't know, Well, she would be known outside Ireland, yeah.
Who's Sharon? I don't know.
She's a
Fucking
musician. She's a traditional Irish musician.
Okay.
And I was with her in some part, and she was a great supporter of this place. And then kind of, I'm not 100% sure the stories in and out, but it was huge there.
Was it supposed to be like some sort of animal sanctuary?
Yeah.
Oh.
And that's it, like. But
the way I saw it described as an abattoir, I thought it was some sort of place where they like a glue factory. The way they talk about glue
oh no,
factory.
this is different. Sorry, this is the one. I thought you were talking about the dead carcasses here in Kerry.
No,
that
no,
time. No, this place was shut down recently. It was in Kildare, but it was basically like horses. It was the only place in Ireland that was like a horse processing plant, and horses to be processed, they have to be between a certain age, and they all have to be tagged. So they were basically bringing in horses that were outside this age group, and they were re-tagging them as horses that could be broken down and sold as meat. But apparently what wasn't done to them, they were crushed. I mean, like, the way...
So what, they were bringing in younger horses than they should have been, is it?
And older, yeah, both, like.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Oh, but you mean this is actually a genuine place for horse meat, like?
Yeah.
Like, exporting
Exactly, yeah. So they went undercover.
How could you eat one? I mean, I saw when I went up to collect Caesar from the fucking animal shelter. I was there looking at a horse. I was standing next to it. I'm looking at it. They're gorgeous things. How could you eat that? Like,
I couldn't. I mean, like, they're so fucking majestic. Yeah.
That's fucked up. But it's closed down now, yeah? And what, they were like
literally
crushing
the day
everything.
that I found out about it. Remember I said it to you and it came up in the news then. I was like, yeah, it's been shut down.
And they weren't exactly humanely
No. It was apparently...
Bit of a cowboy job.
This documentary brought a lot of people to tears.
I didn't see it.
I didn't see it. I just heard about it. From someone that doesn't usually cry.
Well, thankfully it's not that bad when it comes to the department now known to be the origin of the Simian Flu. Neuroscientist Will Rodman was lead scientist for the lab working on Alzheimer's management, with the ultimate goal of the research to be the cure of Alzheimer's, something he believed he was about to achieve all the way back in 2012.
Alzheimer's disease is a neurodegenerative disease that usually starts slowly and progressively worsens, and is the cause of 60 to 70% of cases of dementia. The most common early symptom is difficulty in remembering recent events. As the disease advances, symptoms can include problems with language, disorientation, mood swings, loss of motivation, self-neglect, and behavioural issues. As a person's condition declines, they often withdraw from family and society. Gradually, bodily functions are lost, ultimately leading to death. Although the speed of progression can vary, the average life expectancy following diagnosis is 3 to 12 years.
I feel like because my nan had Alzheimer's, and my granddad had dementia for a while.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a medical miracle. He had dementia, and then one day woke up and it was gone.
It's gone again.
Oh, this is fucked up. This is true. Like,
yeah,
I mean, like,
I've heard it. Like,
he was. I can't exactly remember how it happened. I remember being at home and my mom getting a phone call, and she sent David down for something. Or no, she went down.
Yeah.
My granddad had slipped on like the second step going up the stairs, fell backwards and bumped his head.
Okay.
But he was like an Alzheimer's patient afterwards. He couldn't remember shit like that. And then,
that's after he bumped his head?
Yeah, and he'd get aggressive and he'd fucking be getting upset and stuff like that. So they had to put him in a home. And my nan had Alzheimer's for years before that anyway.
Yeah.
So they both went into a home.
Yeah.
But and then one day he's in the home and I came walking in to say hi to him. And my mom had told me like that he was doing a bit better. And I walked in, and obviously last time he had remembered me, I was like maybe 17, 18, 19, but I still hadn't gotten tattooed yet.
Okay.
And I even remember one day, I was on my motorbike, and I was it was a really hot day. I was just wearing a basketball jersey, so you could see all my sleeves.
Yeah.
And my mom had taken my grandparents out of the nursing home. And they were going to collect my brother from primary school.
Yeah.
And I was driving past, and my mom was like trying to hide me from my grandparents so they didn't see my sleeves.
Oh, God.
But I remember, like, last year, I had nothing on me.
Yeah.
The next thing I walked into the room, I was like, hi, Granddad. And he looked at me and was like, what's all that shit on your arms? Like, you like him?
Yeah.
But he didn't give a shit. He was just laughing about it. But yeah, he just got better. But my nan, it was kind of, I remember it coming on when we were like a young enough age, to the point where you notice stuff like when we were out shopping, my mom would started taking her shopping, and people would come up and say hi to her, and she'd pass herself like, but you could see kind of a bit of confusion in her face when the person is comes up to them initially, and then when they walk away, she'd look at my mom, she'd be like, "Who's that?" You know, and then my mom would fill her in, like, and then she'd remember stuff. And then I used to stay with them a lot, like, because if they were both kind of ill health and older, and so if one of them was in hospital, I'd stay with the other one. So my granddad would go into hospital a lot, and I'd stay with my nan, and it wasn't bad. Like, she'd be grand, she'd be kind of fine most of the time. Yeah. And then she'd kind of tell me a story, and then maybe forgot she told me the story, tell me the story again. But I like listening to those stories. There were all stories about when she was a kid and stuff like that. Like, she told me about how she was engaged to my granddad and then bolted and ditched him. Went to England. No, she made it sound like it was a lot longer. When I asked my mom about it, it sounds like it was only actually a month or two that she was missing for.
That's not that long.
But she went off over to England working, and she was giving out that when she came back, she still had her half of the wedding money, and my granddad had fucked off and bought a boat.
Sounds like something you do, Josh. I don't know what side of the family that comes from.
But yeah, my granddad nearly became a priest. But yeah, so she'd tell me stories like that, and then she'd forget about it, and then a few minutes later she'd tell me the same story, but I didn't really give a shit. And then she'd go off up to bed, and maybe in the middle of the night I might hear her walking around, and I'd just walk out the hall and be like, "Nan, it's the bedroom's that way," and she'd just go off and just, "Oh yeah," and she'd off in bed. Yeah. But I think we were lucky that it was a case of they were in a family that we were watching out from we're always watching out from, so instead of them getting to this point where, you know, you say here where they're like withdrawing from family, withdrawing from society and losing functions and all this stuff, they were in a nursing home by the time they got to that stage, and we were there, you know, we were constantly visiting them and seeing them. Like, I mean, by the time you met my grandmother, by the time we have a picture of her with Riley, like her great grandson, and at that stage she wasn't even talking anymore. No, she smiled a lot when
she tried to make. She tried to make some words at the time, but she wasn't. Yeah. She looked happy out. Though.
Yeah. But that's kind of what happened. She fell and broke her hip, but because of the Alzheimer's, they couldn't reteach her how to walk. So that was it. She was bedridden from that point. And then my granddad died.
I thought of that. All right, yeah, you can't. Like, how can you get physio then? Like, because can't
remember. But here's the spooky shit. My granddad died, and then my nan told everybody that he was coming back to get her in March. March came and went. Nothing happened. Everybody thought it was just in her head.
We just started going out. I remember you saying.
And then the next March, she passed away.
Yeah.
So she said March. She never specified the year, so she wasn't lying. So, but that was my experience with Alzheimer's. See, I look at it in 2 weeks. I was saying to my mom, I was like, I know how terrible a disease it is, especially the early part of it, where you're getting confused and you're still aware that you're forgetting this shit, and you're points of lucidity where you're like, oh fuck, what the fuck am I saying and doing?
Yeah.
Or the people who are left alone and have no one to take care of them and look out for them.
Yeah.
But I turned to my mom and I said, but when Nan died, she didn't know she was dying. She was in her own fucking world, in her element in that bed, you know, off in a different fucking era, you know, because she was seeing her friends in her head, she was seeing her family in her head. So for her, there was no fear. It would just went.
But what happens when it's not the night? As in, like, I understand maybe that they still don't have, but as in, like, I've had family members that were convinced that their son was after dying, like. Do you know, is it like that? That's the opposite side.
But I said again, I suppose it depends on your past. We had a pretty decent fucking family, decent life, kind of. So I suppose you'd have a lot of happy memories to fucking draw on rather than you know. So I don't know, you know. Yeah. We never had. I don't think there was no kids. None of my uncles or aunts died. It would be brothers and sisters for her.
This woman, her son was still alive, like.
Oh. No, that didn't happen with her. So we were okay that way. No, look, it's still a shit disease, but and we nearly had it fixed if this guy didn't fuck it up. Will Rodman was experiencing this very same thing with his father Charles, who prior to contracting the life-altering disease was a music teacher with a love for piano, something you have a bit of in common with him.
Yeah.
Will watched as his usually bright-eyed, loud, intelligent and musical father degenerated into a confused, irritable, hollow old man. The light that once shone bright in his eyes now seemed dim and far away. Watching the disease slowly consume his father spurred Will on with his research, looking at his father's disease less like an expiration date and more like an extreme work deadline.
I can imagine with the piano, like, it must be so frustrating that like you sit down to play
Something
and
played
you
a
only
million
have
times.
like a few bars. Because even now, like we don't have the piano here, but it's at home and I haven't played it in a good while. But like I have muscle memory for like a few bars. But like that's it. Like it frustrates the shit out of me unless I have the sheet. But like it to be consumed
to
for
know it, to know it, and then to
know
not.
you know it,
Yeah.
but you just can't connect it. Like
Will, who was already a neuroscientist when his father received his diagnosis in 2010, took a job at GEN-SYS specifically with the goal of curing his father's disease. It took him only 2 years to make a major breakthrough with a strain of chemical labelled ALZ112.
2 years from scratch, like that's some going.
No, it wasn't from scratch. He was highly motivated and the team was in place and working on projects before he got there. So he had a strong foundation to work off of.
Okay.
So, as I said earlier, before any pharmaceutical drug hits the market, it has to go through a number of rounds of testing. First, it's tested with biological cells and other chemicals to see how it reacts. Then it's tested on infected or damaged cells from the human. After that, it's on to the chimps before finally it's tested on live human subjects. ALZ112 rapidly made its way through the opening trials, passing with flying colours. Because of this, it was cleared only 6 months into discovery for testing on chimpanzees, which were procured from West African jungles under the commission of GEN-SYS laboratories. The apes to be in the first round of testings were named Lorelei, Chambers, Burke, Verdo, and Bright Eyes.
Bright Eyes, that's a nice name. Like Watership Down, like the rabbit.
I've never seen that.
Do you know? That's not the air of
You
it.
bought that show.
Art
I
and
moved up a
Garfunkel.
load to me, and I've never.
I never watched it, but Mom kept trying to get me. I had to watch it, and then she got me the book about it. I never read the book either, but there's a rabbit on the front of it. And
So judging from the cover, Amy has made this comparison.
No, the song is Bright Eyes from it. I haven't just by the book. Well, there was a rabbit on the front of it, so it must be.
Bright Eyes! Bright Eyes was named so because she had the brightest blue eyes, a feature rarely seen on chimps who usually have a light amber-coloured iris. She also earned the name due to her heightened intelligence in comparison to her cage comrades. It was for that reason that Bright Eyes was the star of the show and treated with the greatest of care. Upon administration of the drug to Bright Eyes, her already heightened intelligence seemed to soar as she completed complicated tests with ease and interacted with her carers with what could be perceived as a human-like awareness. Results of this level don't go unnoticed for long. Due to the rapid growth in brain function experienced by Bright Eyes and the impatience of Dr. Rodman due to his own family's plight, it didn't take long for the US government to catch wind of this amazing discovery, and soon after the US military commissioned GEN-SYS to create a military-grade variant of ALZ112 and to begin ape testing immediately. Burke and Verdon would be the test subjects for the government-sanctioned experiment.
What, were they planning to make an army of ape soldiers?
If a certain disgruntled ex-US Special Forces colonel is to be believed, then maybe. I mean, is it that crazy? We already use dolphins in warfare. They're supposed to have self-aware intelligence, aren't they? Makes sense that we take another intelligent animal, one close biologically to us, and use them in war too.
Yep, here it is. A military marine mammal is a cetacean or pinniped that has been trained for military uses. Examples include bottlenose dolphins, seals, sea lions, and beluga whales.
Seals and sea lions, really? They've turned the puppies of the sea into cold-blooded soldiers.
Yep.
You know which ones are ex-military too at the zoo, the ones with the far-off look of horror in their eyes.
Are the ones with the big large tusks that look like, like the army generals? But
all I am picturing is the soldier from Forrest Gump with no legs. What was his name? Sergeant White. I can't fucking remember now.
Oh,
It's gonna crack me up. But anyway, that's all I can picture. But as a fucking
yeah.
sea lion.
The United
The Hawaiian
States.
shirt, the big beard, long hair, just flopping around in his wheelchair.
Oh, cute. The United States and Soviet militaries have trained and employed oceanic dolphins for various uses. Military marine mammals have been trained to rescue lost naval swimmers, guard Navy ships against enemy divers, locate mines for later clearance by divers, and aid in location and recovery of equipment lost on the seabed.
That's actually better than what I thought they were used for. I always thought they were kind of used like a water kamikaze bomber, to be honest.
So you thought they just strapped bombs to fish and then just sent them swimming in the direction of the enemy?
Yeah, sounds mad now, but the enemy would never see that shit coming.
I don't know why I have it in my head that exploding elephants were used at Genuinely, I need to check this.
And exploding cod all over the place, then sending the sperm whale as your oceanic fucking atomic bomb. When it explodes, the mushroom cloud could come out its blowhole just before the chunks of radioactive whale rain down on the opposition.
Thank fuck we live in a neutral country. And sorry, that was post-mortem exploding elephants.
What? Okay. It's a neutral island, so we're surrounded by water. With my defence plan, we have a built-in countrywide force field.
I thought gym soldiers was going to be the craziest thing I talk about today. Like, you'll be guaranteed by next week we'll have a fish tank in the living room and he'll be trailing the carpet in the art of Krav Maga or something.
So I won't have fucking elephants exploding around the place.
The elephants have to be dead first. And
unless it was like Dumbo, then you would have a kamikaze fly.
Oh, yeah.
So big-eared elephants just flying towards you, you are in fucking trouble.
I don't think Dumbo will be mean enough to do that.
Huh?
Explode on you.
Depends on what his religious beliefs are. Anyway, back to the apes. Testing on Bright Eyes was going so well that it was decided to bring her in to meet the GEN-SYS board of directors so they could see for themselves this remarkable ape in action. If this demonstration went well, then Dr. Rodman would get all the funding and clearance he needed to fast-track the ALZ-112 to human testing and onto the mainstream worldwide market. On top of saving his father's mind, Dr. Rodman will become a multi-award-winning, world-famous scientist as the man who cured Alzheimer's and would live comfortably for the rest of his life on the lecture circuit or through book deals.
Not to mention he'd get funding to research anything his heart desires. It's not always about the fame. Sometimes you're in it for the love of the game. This discovery could open up doors for him to further critical research in any field that he sees fit.
Unfortunately, though, that's not how it all went down. While Bright Eyes thrived in her testing, she was put through a much different regime to her counterparts who were commissioned for testing by the military. Burke and Verdon were put through testing that saw them given puzzles and contraptions to solve, assemble or disassemble under extreme sensory pressure. Success would lead to a banana pellet, failure would lead to a mild shock to correct their behaviour. Thanks to the ALZ-112, the need for the shock should have been rare due to the ape's ability to take instruction and execute complicated tasks. But Burke and Verdon developed a sort of defiance towards their military-grade handlers, often refusing to work and in turn taking regular shocks to, and I quote, correct their behaviour. These beasts were indeed getting smarter due to the drug ALZ-112, but with that heightened intelligence came a sort of self-awareness usually only seen in humans. At least that's what witnesses at GEN-SYS claim. Burke eventually stopped responding and was moved to an animal sanctuary on the island of San Francisco to live out his days. His sudden lack of progress baffled scientists. They said one day he could do the most complicated of tasks, and next he simply refused to work, and no amount of shocking corrected the behaviour. In fact, he began to show signs of regression. Signs, it said, that vanished upon his arrival to the sanctuary. There he said to have lived out his days alone, not interacting with the other apes, but instead he'd collect rocks and stack them in the water. Sanctuary workers believed he was trying to build a bridge off the island. Experts believe Burke became so self-aware that he realised he was being used for experimentation and essentially went on strike, going so far as to imitate the regular apes in a bid to be deemed useless and retired. Verdon, on the other hand, took advantage of a lab assistant's negligence, breaking free of his restraints and making a break for it. He was shot dead by GEN-SYS security. But they had the military-grade variant in their system, and Bright Eyes had the Alzheimer's cure variant in her.
So it should be fine.
Up until the big day, Bright Eyes had been a docile and relatively willing test subject, interacting with her captors in the same manner as a child would. But on the night before the big demonstration, security said she had what sounded like a restless sleep with a lot of rustling and noise coming from the chimpanzee's holding room. The next morning wasn't much better when handler Robert Franklin went to get Bright Eyes for the demo. The chimp didn't seem too enthusiastic, refusing to leave her cage, closing the door whenever Franklin tried to coax her out. Eventually, Franklin was forced to use a loop leash, essentially a noose on a pole, to gently force Bright Eyes from her cage. This caused a usually friendly chimp to become enraged, making threatening advances towards her captors in the process. Have you ever seen a chimp get mad? They look fucking scary. All that muscle bulging, teeth showing, and their face snarling at you. I wouldn't want to fucking piss one off.
I remember the first time seeing their teeth, and I never realised they had teeth like that, thinking, holy fuck, you wouldn't stand a chance like.
I remember the first time you showed me a picture of a shaved chimp, and how much fucking muscle tone that fucking thing had.
Or a gorilla's skeleton compared to a human skeleton is bonkers.
Bright Eye's aggression forced Franklin to call in extra security, who came in guns drawn, causing an already tense scene to become even more volatile. Bright Eyes, sensing danger, advanced on the men, who began shooting, but due to the ape catching them by surprise, didn't manage to hit the target. She tore through the building's massive halls, making threatening gestures to anyone who dared to get in her way. Meanwhile, ignorant of his department's ongoing disaster, Dr. Will Rodman was in the main meeting room, walking the board of directors through his research findings and results, all while talking up what was to be his main event in a demonstration of ALZ-112 through Bright Eyes. The findings he was sharing with them was groundbreaking if it proved to be a success, and had them all in awe at the prospects of this miracle drug and what it could do for their ever-growing bank accounts. Unfortunately for them and for the good doctor, just as Will summoned for Bright Eyes to be brought to the boardroom, she, maybe seeking him out, burst through the doors of her own accord. As she stood on the massive meeting table in front of all the board members, she again gave a terrifyingly threatening display of anger. Panic ensued, and in a commotion, Bright Eyes was executed by GEN-SYS security, and just like Verdon before her, she was shot down in the building where she was held captive. As Bright Eyes was shot down, so was any hope Dr. Will Rodman had for getting ALZ-112 past the finish line. The chimp's display of aggression was attributed to the ALZ-112 chemical, with claims being made that while increasing the brain's functionality, it also in turn increased the part of the brain regulating aggression. For that reason, all funding was pulled from ALZ-112 and the project was scrapped, and all infected apes were to be put down. Will was given a mandatory holiday and told he could find a new research field upon his return. This disaster wasn't just a few years worth of work down the drain for Will, it was essentially the signature on his father's death warrant. But like I said earlier, Will was highly motivated and he wasn't ready to give up, even if it meant he'd have to keep researching and testing in secret from home. So with GEN-SYS shutting down production on ALZ-112, Dr. Will Rodman began work from home on ALZ-113. His test subject, a baby chimp named Caesar, and eventually his own father. Caesar was the first chimp born in GEN-SYS labs and was born in secret. You see, Bright Eyes had been pregnant upon capture. She must have been impregnated literally days before capture, and after a quick physical and a few shots, she went straight to GEN-SYS labs, the pregnancy going completely unnoticed.
You'd think one of the scientists or handlers working there would have spotted it in the 8 months the chimp was pregnant.
There's a whole fucking reality TV show dedicated to humans that didn't realise they were pregnant until they suddenly gave fucking birth. So it's not impossible that it could happen.
It happens to humans all the time.
Again, a whole TV show dedicated to it. I didn't know I was pregnant. Either way, the infant was born the night before his mother was shot down in front of the board of directors. Will would later hypothesize that Bright Eye's aggression was not down to a side effect of ALZ-112, but down to her natural motherly instinct to protect her newborn infant son. Caesar would not be discovered until the great ape genocide in GEN-SYS. Robert Franklin and Dr. Rodman made the discovery, and seeing an opportunity to further his studies and unable to hand an infant over to be euthanized, Will secretly took Caesar home. Being the head of his department, it was on Will to account for each ape, and thankfully, the higher-ups were not interested in checking his work, trusting that the ALZ-112 infected chimps had been destroyed as commanded. Now, let alone was Caesar the first ape born in GEN-SYS captivity, he was also the first ape to be born of a chimp infected with ALZ-112. This made the chimp naturally smarter than his counterparts. The infant acted and learned similarly to a child and was distinctive like his mother by his human-like eyes, which also had blue in them but was hidden by strong, bright flecks of green, a side effect later attributed to ALZ-112 and 113 exposure.
Okay.
In a short space of time, Will's suspicion about ALZ-112, its side effects, Bright Eyes, and her maternal instinct to protect proved to be true. Caesar excelled at a very early age, showing zero aggression as Will and Charles Rodman raised him like just another member of the family. Things went so well with Caesar from such an early point that Will decided to take a risk. Taking samples of the now shelved ALZ-112, he administered it to his own father, who had begun to succumb to his disease faster than expected. The results were miraculous, and over the next few months, Charles regained his life. His mind now sharper than ever. It seemed like Will had cracked the code and put an end to the nightmare that was Alzheimer's.
And hit the jackpot at the same time.
So because it was all unauthorized and he was using company samples on the sly, Will decided to keep his father's progress a secret until he was certain the effects were permanent. Plus, to be honest, he was more enamored with Caesar and his level of intelligence brought on by the miracle compound ALZ-112. Over the next 5 years, Caesar learned a fair bit of sign language and appeared to react with more human-like emotion. He could easily master puzzles of a child of equal age to him and even did some chores around the house, helping to clean and even prepare his own meals when necessary. His favourite pastime was going to the large Redwood Forest close to the city with Will for long walks, or in Caesar's case, long swings through the trees.
Will, just let him run free. Like, if you did that with your dog, you'd be fine.
Caesar fucking hated being on a leash. Loathed it. He used to sign frantically at Will about his displeasure every time he had to put it on. But he understood Will when he told him that it was for strangers' peace of mind and not to restrain him.
Okay.
Will trusted Caesar, but other people weren't used to seeing a chimp roaming free, and their nervous reaction could cause complaints, which would in turn draw unwanted attention to Will and Caesar, who on paper was supposed to be dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, for about 5 years, everything was going well. But all good things must come to an end, and after years of progress, Charles' mind began to regress. Unfortunately, antibodies began to form in his body and targeted the ALZ-112, and before long, Charles was back to where he started. Not one to give up easily, a desperate Dr. Rodman took the research and results of the past 5 years to his direct superior, Stephen Jacobs, who at first threatened to fire the scientist, but after looking over the doctor's findings, gave him the clearance to begin work immediately on ALZ-113, a compound that would hopefully fight against the antibodies and in turn finally crack the code and give them the final cure for Alzheimer's disease, but that we know will go on to form the deadly Simian Flu. They always say, like I was saying earlier, my granddad getting his mind back was a bit of a miracle. I always wondered when my mom said that why no neurologist wanted to look into his brain and see what caused it to heal.
Yeah.
So I was fucking amazed by it. I looked it up. It seemed like it wasn't the fucking standard thing. So I always wondered why no one wanted to give that shit a scan and have a look and see why this man was able to come back.
I'd want to give my brain a scan and know, like, why have I...
Oh, my mom used to joke, like, it would take a silver bullet to take him down. He had heart attacks, he had fucking stroke, he had the work, and he just kept coming back.
Still going.
I don't know, he's dead now.
Well, no, but but he was at the time.
Oh, he just kept going and going and going and going. Like.
Yeah.
So this new strain required a new crop of chimps for testing, and again, testing went well. Really well, in fact. Except that there was a slight shortage of chimps. Restrictions placed on GEN-SYS after the Blue Eyes incident meant GEN-SYS were stuck buying in older, more seasoned test subjects. No better example of that was in Koba, a bonobo ape who had been in the system a long time and had the scars of human testing to prove it. Koba was a little more aggressive than the other test subjects, but also knew how to play the fool for his human masters, doing as he was instructed for an easy life, all while watching for human error. He was a flight risk, is what I'm trying to say here. Like, you know, later, if witness testimony is right, he would prove to be far more vicious and cunning than his handlers gave him credit for. You see, after the incident with Bright Eyes 5 years earlier, stricter precautions were taken in the development of ALZ-113. All researchers and handlers were instructed to wear PPE gear like a full hazmat suit, including a breathing mask. Now, I should point out that this is said to be the moment that officially kicked off the pandemic. Koba, like Verdun before him, noticed one of his foot restraints were loose and kicked at Robert Franklin, knocking his protective mask from his face and breaching a vial of ALZ-113 in the process, which had been vaporized for convenience. It's easier to get an ape to breathe in the gas than it is to inject.
Yeah.
Robert Franklin was the first human to be contaminated by the new strain of ALZ.
So we had to wear masks for 2 years because an ape knocked this guy's mask off.
Yep. We suffer for the original masks. And sounds like a crazy statement, but it is a line in the Simian Bible of Apology.
Oh.
We'll get to that next week.
Okay.
But that's a whole other can of worms, and we'll be diving into that crazy world of the Simian Flu conspiracies next week. For this week, we will stick to the facts, or at least the facts according to various witnesses and reports. Obviously, we didn't know it at the time, but Robert Franklin will be patient zero in the Simian Flu pandemic.
What did they add to the compound to make it turn so drastically? I mean, Charles thrived for 5 years before reverting back to his original state. What was it about this new strain that attacked the human body so quick and violently?
Okay, so in an attempt to stop the antibodies from forming, ALZ was made to be more aggressive. I'm not a scientist, so I can't really give the particulars, but essentially it was a stronger strain. The ALZ113 allowed the brains of the apes to replicate its own cells to repair itself, which in turn granted them heightened intelligence. As it turns out, the newly found intelligence is then inherited by the offspring of the infected ape. The only physical notable symptom, which we mentioned before, is the adoption of a green tint in the infected ape's iris. In theory, given the reaction of the human body to ALZ112, ALZ113 should have had similar effects on man as it did on apes. Unfortunately, though, the human immune system isn't as strong as apes, and the new strain proved too strong for the human body to take.
Weak humans.
What? Huh?
I said weak humans.
What we also didn't know at the time was, unlike ALZ112, 113 was so aggressive in its nature that once it was turned to gas and became airborne, it went viral, and once Robert Franklin left the labs of the GEN-SYS, it was free to move quickly and freely around the world. Starting in San Francisco, the virus would be worldwide within 3 months of first detection.
I think we all know what happened then. The world went into lockdown, everything came to a standstill, and that's how it stayed until the vaccine was released.
Do you know what I never understood? Why did people get so upset at the anti-vaxxers at the time? I get the frustration of lockdown, people lost businesses, livelihood and loved ones. I might be wrong, but in my mind, if I'm vaccinated, why should I give two shits about what anybody else is doing? Surely if I'm fully vaxxed and you're not, then it's your problem, right? I'm not going to get sick, I'm vaccinated, you're at risk because you're not. But the way people went on about anti-vaxxers, it was like they were putting the rest of us in danger. I always just saw it as natural selection. If you're dumb enough to believe all the stupid conspiracy theories, then it's your funeral. Or am I missing something? I mean, it seems to me that even with all the bitching and moaning, that, you know, that's what happened in the end. The anti-vaxxers are still not vaccinating, and we're still all here.
Yeah, but you're not 100% covered. All the different vaccinations had different effectivity. Is that how you say it? Effective rate, like, as in, like, that's why people are like, oh, I got the Pfizer, I got the Moderna. You know, I think one of them was only like 60-something% effective.
Okay.
Yeah. So in theory, I understand what you're saying, like, but if it was 100% effective, yeah, in theory, why should you give a shit? But that was the thing; it's not 100% effective.
Yeah, but it still worked out.
It still worked out.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's because there was more smart people than dumb people.
Yes.
Okay, it's honesty time. We have a confession to make. We suck at socials, no good at Insta, can't send a tweet or an X or whatever that supervillain looking motherfucker is calling it now. Stick to your space cars, Elon. But we know you want to chat, you want to be kept updated, you want to be alive all the goddamn time. So we're getting down from the antisocial soapbox and giving this a try. So come chat to us on Insta and Twitter at AliveAlivePod, or hit us up by email at itsalivealivepod@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. This is a project, it's still a work in progress, and we just want to give you more what you like and less of what you can't stand. So give us a like, give us a follow, we'll always hit you back, and we'll always try to reply to everyone. So come say hi. We don't bite. Well, at least Aimee doesn't. And she keeps me well fed, so you got nothing to worry about. Now, back to the show.
As testing continued on ALZ113, life went on for the Rodman family. Caesar continued to thrive while Charles declined more and more rapidly. It all came to a head in the late spring of 2016 when Charles got into a confrontation with his neighbour, an extremely unpleasant man by the name of Douglas Hunziker. Hunziker was a crass and bad-tempered man who seemed to be almost paranoid concerning his well-being and the security of his property and his children, which manifested itself in acting in a hostile fashion towards the Rodmans, including Caesar, who he had a particular dislike for.
To be fair, if someone moved in next door to us with a pet chimp, I'd be worried about it being left alone with the boys too.
Yeah, I get that, but to be fair, Caesar's no ordinary chimp. I keep calling him a chip. But I suppose, how was anyone outside the Rodmans to know that? Either way, Caesar wasn't a big fan of Hunziker either. You see, when Caesar was still an infant, he could hear the Hunziker kids, Alice and Todd, playing in their yard, and being a child himself brought up in the human world, he decided he wanted to go play. Startled by the sight of the chimp for the first time, the Hunziker kids panicked and began to scream. Douglas came at the 3-year-old Caesar swinging a baseball bat, frightening the young chimp, causing him to fall in an attempt to escape and slashing his leg open. Caesar did not forget this encounter, so when a confused Charles left the house one day thinking he was supposed to be going to work and crashed his car directly into Hunziker's car, another argument erupted, with Hunziker holding Charles at the crash site right outside their house. Caesar witnessed the altercation from his bedroom in the converted attic of the Rodman home. Thinking he was protecting his adopted grandfather and seeing Hunsinger as a bad man from an early age, Caesar went on the attack. He chased Hunsinger around the neighborhood before finally grabbing the man and biting his finger off.
Holy shit. See, that's why I wouldn't feel safe around a chimp. Like, they're lovely animals, but they should be left in the wild. Like, they're not suitable pets.
I always wanted a pet monkey, but like a small one like Spike from Ace Ventura or Marcel from Friends. Actually, they might be the same monkey.
They both are capuchin monkeys, but different capuchin monkeys. The one from Ace Ventura's real name is Binks, and he was also in George of the Jungle.
Oh, yeah.
Marcel's real name was Katie, and he showed up on an episode of 30 Rock as well as Friends.
I would assume that should be she.
She. Hey, it's just after clicking with me. Caesar.
Hmm.
That's Char. Does that mean Cesare is doesn't matter? I thought Caesar was like a different language for Charles.
Oh. We were not naming our fucking. She's mad about the fucking.
No, it
royalty.
is.
You're
it is.
mad
It's a
about the
derivative.
British royalty. That's it. You just want to have it fucking named
I mean
after
the
June.
grandfather. Do you not see the link there? The grandfather.
Oh,
it is.
maybe.
Cesare is the Italian.
To Charles Rodman.
Yeah. No, that's what it is. That's what the link is with the names.
I thought you were just trying to get our dog to be fucking named after that.
No,
crap
Charlie's
over
not.
England.
Charlie's not bad for a dog though.
I had a dog named Charlie.
So
once.
did we? Yeah.
I would love to get a monkey as a pet though, but I do think, I think I'd feel bad keeping it away from captivity, unless you could like prove to me that the little guy was 100% happy living in a domesticated environment, then I couldn't justify it.
Nah.
But saying that, I mean, I suppose, if they were like happy out here getting all the treats they wanted and all the stimulation they wanted, then yeah, I look natural habitat and all that shit.
Yeah.
But saying that natural habitat has lions and stuff in it, so maybe they're better off here. I don't know. Let the chimp decide.
Are lions natural? I knew. Oh, who'd
They still
win?
have spiders
Who the
and
fuck would
snakes
win?
and-
Who'd win between a lion and a chimp?
Oh, the lion.
Do you think
A
so?
Chimp isn't far off.
What
Us
about
is
a gorilla?
stronger, but
What about a gorilla?
that might be a better battle.
Okay.
That would be a fun one to watch.
Yeah.
Gorilla versus
What about
lion.
a group
on
chimp?
pay-per-view? Only with the It's Alive Alive Harvest Network. Buy it now.
I would like to say this is not happening just before animal rights groups come and like throw paint at our house.
So obviously the finger incident wasn't going to go unpunished, and after calling in a lot of favours, Will and his veterinarian partner Caroline Arna managed to get Caesar out of a death sentence, but instead he was to be sent to an ape sanctuary in San Bruno until his case could be heard properly in court. Will was confident he could get Caesar back home, but Caroline knew from experience that this was unlikely. The best they could really ask for is to get Caesar out of the underfunded state-run sanctuary for a private, more well-equipped facility. As this all went down, Robert Franklin became sick with an illness that was said to resemble the Ebola virus.
Ooh.
Franklin documented his symptoms in rough notes taken throughout his final days. He said that within the first day or two, he suffered from severe nosebleeds. By day 3, a sudden influenza-like stage characterized by fatigue, fever, weakness, decreased appetite, muscular pain, joint pain, headache, and sore throat set in. Stuff we all know about from the last few years. This is often followed by nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pains, and sometimes hiccups. The combination of severe vomiting and diarrhea often led to severe dehydration. Next, shortness of breast and breasts.
Shortness of
Your
breast.
breasts get smaller. It was a fucking absolute nightmare for everybody. Chest pain may occur because of your boobs getting smaller, obviously. Along with swelling, headaches, and confusion, which I obviously have right now. Finding nosebleeds would return, but with more ferocity, and would now be accompanied by bleeding from the eyes, ears, and mouth. Once that bleeding began, it will continue until the infected person expired.
But that's worst case scenario. I caught it at the height of the pandemic. No bleeding, but I had breathing issues, chest pain, and confusion. But I swear to God, the confusion is still with me. And that's how I first knew that I had it, was the confusion. Because I didn't feel right at work. I didn't voice that I felt like I still had that touch of confusion until a few months ago when I was at home. I was talking to my brother and his partner. he feels like he still has a touch of the confusion afterwards as well. And we're not the only people. Like, people report this, that it's still like, it's not that, like, sometimes it feels like I can't concentrate.
What kind of confusion? You just like forget what you were doing, or just
it's just
making silly mistakes?
Yeah, that kind of thing. Like that day at work, I was staring at my computer screen, and I knew that I was typing, but like it was very hard to recall. Like if I was supposed to remember a number, which I usually have to do, like like a file number, and I'd be typing it in somewhere, and I'd be like,
"It's a small shit you usually
yeah. And it was annoying because it was small stuff.
Yeah, a lot of us were infected by a weaker variant. The deadly version of the virus was thankfully rarer, but still caused the death of up to 7 million people. But we're not really here today to rehash the 2 years of hell we all lived through. We're here to talk about the effects it had on apes and how it led to the great ape escape in San Francisco that saw a huge tribe of chimps, gorillas and orangutans break loose from captivity only to go missing in the great Redwood Forest.
I know it's a bit off topic, but I was looking into Koba's history, and considering he is thought to be the ape to kick off the spread of the virus by infecting Robert Franklin, I thought it might be interesting to have a look at him to see if there was anything on his history. Turns out there's a whole book on him called Koba's Karma. This poor ape had a horrific upbringing. Koba was born and raised in a primate research facility where he lived with his loving mother and their kind caregiver Mary, who taught him sign language. Like many sign language apes, Koba didn't understand that apes who didn't use sign language were like him, and also wasn't taught by Mary that what the word chimp meant. As a result, Koba regarded non-signing chimps as big black caterpillars and identified himself with humans, a sentiment Mary was aware of but never made any attempts to change. One day, Mary's assistant, Kuo, left the facility and was replaced by an abusive alcoholic named Roger. Due to being unfamiliar and uncomfortable with Roger's rough handling methods, Koba disobeyed him without even meaning to, causing Roger to verbally and physically assault the young bonobo in a drunken rage. When Koba's mother attacked Roger to defend her son, Roger retaliated by fatally beating her with a sack of oranges.
Jesus fucking Christ. Where do you get a sack of oranges from to beat somebody?
Well, I presume they like their oranges.
Oh, first the closest thing to him.
Yeah.
Fucking
I don't think he went specifically looking for a bag of oranges. Due to how many oranges were in the bag to do that much damage? Due to having never seen a dead animal before or even been taught about death, Koba did not understand at the time that his mother was dead, though he missed her terribly. As a result of the death of Koba's mother, Mary's project funding was cut and Koba was sent to a new home, which Mary promised would be good. That turned out to be false, as Koba was sold to a TV studio under the care of the abusive Tommy Tad. There he lived with another young ape who knew sign language named Milo, with whom Koba became friends, although they were never as close as Koba was to his late mother.
Okay. Obviously.
Yeah. Tommy was the producer of a comedy show entitled Monkey of the House and regularly forced Koba and Milo to do tricks, electrocuting them or beating them if they failed or disobeyed him. One night, for his own amusement, Tommy forced the two apes to drink alcohol, causing them to get drunk and accidentally hurt themselves. The next day, Koba and Milo were unable to perform correctly due to still being slightly groggy, hungover. So frustrated, Tommy left to talk with Alice, his supervisor. In Tommy's absence, an unruly boy visiting the set harassed Milo by poking him, insulting him, and demanding that he do a trick. Provoked, Milo bit the boy on the nose in self-defense, and upon discovering this, Tommy punished Milo by wiring his mouth shut, which disturbed Koba.
Disturbs me too, that's fucked up.
That is fucked up.
I'd have bit that kid the fucking nose too.
Yep. Tommy's nose, no, not Tommy's nose, was eventually cancelled. Tommy's show was eventually cancelled due to poor ratings and litigation sparked by Milo biting the body.
Biting the boy, not the body.
The boy, come here.
Well, technically biting a bit of the body.
Yeah, the body of the boy, of the nose, yeah. Turning to drink, Tommy took his anger out on the two apes. When Koba finally tried to defend himself from Tommy's abuse, Tommy punished the bonobo by slashing his face with a knife and then blinding his left eye with a lit cigarette. Yep. Tommy later killed himself and the two apes attempted to escape his home only to be caught and separated by animal control officers. Koba was then sent to a laboratory where he was subjected to painful experiments, the very first of which involved him being given an injection which almost instantly made him vomit while he was muzzled.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. He was also vivisected several times, always with anaesthetic. But
that's where you cut you right down the middle, right?
Yeah, opened up. Yeah. But this ultimately made little difference because Koba's stitched up wounds always hurt whenever he woke up, and the sedative drug always made him feel sick. When he wasn't being experimented on, Koba was kept locked up in a cage which had no enrichment.
You know what to play around with.
Yeah. He tried to sign his captors to his captors that he was not a big black caterpillar.
Mary should have explained to him what a chimp was so that he could get himself out of this one a bit better. I mean, if he's saying I'm not a big black caterpillar, they're thinking, dumb it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's probably why they ignored him. As a result of boredom, loneliness, and the trauma of the experiments, Koba quickly descended into depression. He even developed self-harming behaviours such as pulling out his fur and injuring his knuckles and fingers or by signing them against the floor of his cage until they bled. Koba was eventually discovered by a neuroscientist named Aimee and the latter's superior, Stephen Jacobs. Aimee knew sign language, and since Koba knew it too, selected him as his test subject for an experiment intended to improve cognitive ability. Delighted to finally have someone to sign with him, Koba reluctantly submitted to being experimented on. Aimee then had a machine designed to produce images directly from the brain attached to Koba's head and back while the bonobo was sedated. Though this ultimately made little difference as the machine still caused Koba crippling pain when he woke up. A few days later, after the pain had diminished enough for Koba to think clearly, Aimee did lots of signing with Koba in order to test the machine's effectiveness. Although Koba came close to forming a bond with Aimee, Jacobs fired the neuroscientist after his experiments failed, resulting in a severe financial loss for Jacobs. Afterwards, Jacobs was witnessed by staff berating the poor bonobo Koba in his cage, callously deriding him as a stupid, ugly monkey and claiming that he would put Koba down if he could. This caused Koba to develop a strong dislike of Jacobs, obviously, and humans in general.
Yeah, I'd hate this too if I was Koba.
Yeah, absolutely.
Koba wasn't the only disillusioned ape living in the Golden State, because Caesar was fast realising that the upbringing he had experienced was not that of your standard chimp. Needless to say, San Bruno Primate Shelter was a far cry from the Ritz, and the handlers were known for their, at best, indifference to the apes' needs and feelings, and at worst, their out-and-out cruelty towards the beasts. One handler in particular is said to have really provoked Caesar into what comes next, and he was Dodge Landon. Dodge had a job off the books through his father, the shelter manager, John Landon. If Dodge was the cruelty, John was the indifference. He didn't care about the animals, it was just a handy job for him. So he wouldn't go out of his way to be cruel to them, but he wouldn't go out of his way to stop his son from being a dick either.
Yeah.
Dodge was working off the books because he couldn't officially hold a job in the shelter due to his long record of assault and abusive offences. He was known to start fights and be heavy-handed with his missus, so he was a scumbag, to sum it up. The next part is patched together through, various different CCTV camera footage, which over the course of a weekend shows Caesar plan and execute a mass escape of all apes in San Francisco. Like circuses, zoos, sanctuaries, labs, you name it, he upgraded and organised all of them. I mean, if it wasn't documented on CCTV, you'd think this was an urban legend. But it was documented. We know it to be fact that when we have seen the research and results of ALZ 112 and 113. So let's have a look at just what happened in the shelter to get the ball rolling and just what went into Caesar's plan, leading to him and his tribe taking a stand on the Golden Gate Bridge before disappearing into the Redwood Forests of San Francisco.
Cool.
As I said, Caesar knew pretty quickly that he was an extraordinary ape in comparison to his peers within the walls of the primate shelter. From the shelter security cameras, we see the ape first try to make contact with the other chimps through sign language, but to no avail. In fact, in his first few days in the shelter, we see that he has to fight it out with the alpha of the particular group in a chimp by the name of Rocket.
Seeing he was brought up as a human child, would Caesar not have seen himself as above that primitive alpha stuff?
Definitely. But he was also smart enough to realise that these primitive apes were not going to be reasoned with by logic. That he had to get in touch with his own primitive side if he was going to have any luck of leading them. Using his higher intelligence, Caesar easily bested Rocket and took control of the tribe as the new alpha.
What did he do to beat Rocket?
Right, so on top of having orangutans and chimpanzees here, they had one big-ass silverback gorilla.
Class.
And that guy was named Buck, and he was kept in a cage on his own. Couldn't be released. They basically couldn't control him. The people couldn't control him.
Okay.
So Buck had been locked in this cage for a long time. And when Caesar figured out a way out of his own cage, the first thing he did was go directly to Buck's cage and release him. leaving the fucking gorilla free for the first time in years. So he was able to run around the enclosure, go absolutely apeshit, and basically became Caesar's muscle because Caesar had freed him. You know?
Nice.
He
Good
bonded
thinking,
with Caesar
Caesar.
instantly, and when Rocket came to attack Caesar, Caesar basically hit him with a fucking, I can't remember what it was. He hit him with something in the head, and then Buck kind of stood up and bashed him about a bit, and Rocket realised he was screwed and put out his hand in respect for Caesar, kind of in submission to Caesar, put on his head, and that was Caesar used to do this thing or something. They said like he used to rub hands or something as a sign of
Okay.
I don't know, respect to him or something. It's strange. It's a really weird fucking story.
Okay.
Anyway, when that was all over, Caesar went and robbed, this is on camera, he robbed Dodge's cookies that he had left out, and he had Rocket distribute them to each ape, one to each ape, and Rocket obeyed and followed what Caesar told him. Now, this is pre-ALZ-113 for these apes.
Okay.
And he's managed to get through to him far enough that he's taken over the group, and he has the gorilla on his side, and he's put the chimpanzees in line. Like,
Okay.
this is one smart ape.
Definitely.
It appears also that in this time Caesar seemed to have bonded with an old orangutan by the name of Maurice. He could also sign basic stuff, but enough to converse with Caesar. He was an old circus monkey.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Sign language experts who watched the video say it seems the two were talking about how dumb the chimps were and how disillusioned Caesar was with his place in life. He felt betrayed by Will and by humans he had grown to feel were his peers. It pained Caesar to see real apes for what they were and seemed to have grand plans of teaching the apes to be better, to grow and learn, to evolve and build their own society. This must be frightening to watch these fucking apes sign. It's believed that this must be like when we saw the AI thing start to talk. And
creeped everybody out. Yeah.
It's believed at this point the idea must have come to him to use Will's ALZ-113 to wake his peers' minds and enact what is now known as the Great Ape Uprising, which took place in San Francisco in 2019. Little sidebar here, around the same time, Charles Rodman unfortunately succumbed to the Alzheimer's disease and passed away at the age of 65.
Aww.
So footage from the night shows that Caesar had the lock on his cage fixed so that he would not fully close at lockdown. Once the shelter shut down for the night, Caesar opened the door and made his way through the ape exercise enclosure where they were kept by day, up to the very top of the room and out of an ever-open skylight window. He is seen through CCTV, fucking that one up, going in the direction of his old home at the Rodmans. The same cameras pick up the ape coming back to the shelter about 2 hours later and not empty-handed. He is then seen to return to the shelter where he opens and rolls canisters of ALZ-113 down through the apes' cages, then opens the cage doors. It appears at this point Caesar seemed to give some sort of rallying speech in a way of very simple signing and chest pounding. Like he wasn't speaking to them, but he was interacting with them and they were getting it. They were buying what this chimp was selling.
So, as in, like, literally, like, kind of just from natural instinct, from, like, the way he was moving.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But it's like, Maurice was seen to sign as well at one point on CCTV that the chimp's brains were woke. That this ALZ had sparked something.
A different level of intelligence.
So, and obviously the green flecks were almost instantly in their eyes after they inhaled the gas. So, after Caesar's rallying cry, the apes all returned to the cages and closed the now unlocked doors behind them. Caesar went back to the common area to wait. He had one more score to settle before the apes mounted their assault on San Fran. Dodge, who was on our early morning shifts that week, entered the shelter at about 5:30 a.m. The ever-aggressive young man, seeing Caesar out of his cage and in the play area, was only too happy to take advantage of the ape's perceived insolence. Entering the enclosure with an electrified cattle prod, Dodge advanced on Caesar, looking to scare the now more defiant ape. Now, I don't know if this bit's true, but lip-reading experts claim that while in dispute with Dodge, Caesar grabs the boy's arm as he swung the cattle prod, and again, not me saying this, it's lip-reading experts. They swear it appears as if the ape, Caesar, yells the word, no.
Bet you that was creepy as fuck.
There is some credence to the claim, though, because Dodge genuinely looks shocked and terrified in the video clip at the point that they claim Caesar appears to speak. And it wouldn't be the only claim of the ape talking in this story, but we'll get to that a little later. Caesar then knocked Dodge out and locked him into one of the cages, and the apes then lay in wait for each other member of staff to arrive and, under Caesar's instruction, gently escort them to the cages.
So no casualties, and Caesar's already one up in humans.
Nearly no casualties. You see, when Dodge woke up in the cell, he was enraged, and still armed with the cattle prod, he swung the electrified baton at Caesar. Caesar was prepared and hit Dodge with a power hose, knocking the young man back, killing him when the electric baton made contact with the liquid. Now, the significance here of that is there's also video footage from about 2 days earlier where Dodge was doing the exact same thing for fun to Caesar, hitting him with a high-powered hose, blasting the chimp back into the wall and scaring the shit out of him in the process.
Okay.
So this was kind of retribution in that way, and the cattle prod being there was just a kind of happy accident.
Okay.
From here, we all know the story. Caesar and his tribe swept across San Francisco, freeing every ape possible along the way, infecting them with ALZ 113 in the process. Zoo, circus, sanctuary, shelters, and finally labs were all cleared out, GEN-SYS being the final destination before the raid on the Golden Gate Bridge. This we all got to watch out in the news as the apes outplotted, outmaneuvered, and outfought the US National Guard, San Francisco PD, San Fran FD, and GEN-SYS private security. It was fucking awesome to watch. With all those fucking helicopters flying around and the chimps, and the gorillas jumping through the air at the helicopters when they got too low and taking them down. And when they had it was weird. It was like they were stationed, they'd set up like a barricade. And they were waiting for the ape army, essentially, to come at them.
Yeah.
And when nothing came, but they could hear them, what they didn't kind of account for was the fact that these things could swing. So the orangutans came from underneath the bridge. The chimps and the gorillas are coming down from overhead. And these people are looking forward, thinking they're coming forward, and they absolutely tear the fuck through them.
You think they'd have fucking clicked, like... You think that they'd have...
Hang on. Who's prepared for an army of fucking apes?
But instantly, when you pointed out, I was like, yeah, apes can swing. They're not just huge oversight.
Yeah, but unless you had a monkey expert right there with you in a panic station where you just get hit. This is all happening.
Imagine working away in the zoo one day and you get a call. You're like, you're the city's resident ape expert. We need you to come down here to the bridge because we're going.
You're about to become a hero.
Yeah.
This all happened really fast. You're talking about 5:30 in the morning. Dodge gets taken, and from there on, we're talking by the end of the day, these apes are bolting across San Francisco Bridge. You have to imagine that it's just going to be like the police getting calls of there's a bunch of apes attacking here and they've released apes here, and the next thing they're somewhere else. They're going to move fast, so they're swinging. So you don't have a lot of time to think. All you're thinking is barricade the bridges are coming down and try and take out as many as you can, tranquilize as many as you can.
Definitely.
And that's not how it worked out, because the apes were just a little bit smarter than the man. In the aftermath, 90% of the apes made it to the other side and disappeared into the giant Redwood Forest. Will Rodman seemed to be the last person to genuinely see Caesar before he disappeared in 2019, although plenty more would claim to have had some sort of interactions with the remarkable ape over the years. Will says that he made one last attempt to get Caesar to come home with him, and he claims Caesar replied by looking around at all the other apes and saying, "Caesar is home." Will says he understood and decided to let Caesar go with his new tribe. Dr. Will Rodman will pass away from the Simian Flu in December of 2021. Now, it hasn't been that long since the woke ape tribe went missing into the wilderness, but since 2019, signs of life have been found in amongst the brush. Signs of sophisticated traps for hunting and huts that look like they were built by men have been discovered over the years, with some men even claiming to have come across the roving ape village, only to return to the suspected site with more witnesses to find the site empty. Some speculate that apes have long moved on, gone far away from San Francisco in a bid to kill some of the heat on them, and that anything found in the redwoods is man-made hoaxes designed simply to feed the legend.
Yeah, it's not a story that needs a little something extra. We had a good 2 years to think about the virus. I'm pretty sure none of us are going to forget that anytime soon.
Hat in a hat.
Yeah.
The one last thing that could be a sign that Caesar and his tribe still roam the Redwood Forest is a symbol. We said earlier that Caesar had a room in the attic of the Rodman's home. In that room was a circular window with a pattern on it. The only way I can describe the pattern is if you took a circle and copy and pasted another circle right on top of it.
Okay.
Then cut the top circle into quarters and invert each quarter so that the round part is in the inside the middle of the bottom circle. Best I can do. I'll post a picture of it on Instagram later, but yeah. Anyway, this symbol is said to be used by Caesar as a symbol of power and is seen regularly engraved in trees around redwoods. It's claimed he often signed in the days before the attacks, apes alone weak, apes together strong, and it's believed this symbol is the insignia for this mantra. Now, obviously, due to the resulting worldwide pandemic, it's safe to say that apes fell out of favour with a lot of narrow-minded man, which unfortunately feels like the majority rather than the minority a lot more these days. And due to the devastation caused by the Simian Flu, a rise in what can only be described as ape genocide did occur worldwide at the beginning of the pandemic. To this day, militiamen and doomsday prophesizers search and hunt for the woke ape, looking for the distinctive green-eyed beast. For most of us, we can see that the pandemic was our own doing as a result of our mistreatment of these animals when it comes to the product and chemical testing and our negligence when it comes to their health and well-being and the regulation of how these drugs are made and handled. For the rest of you, there are the crazy conspiracies about the de-evolution of man and the rise of the master ape race and sinister celebrity religions, all based around a crazy sci-fi book written by a Frenchman in the 60s that goes by the name of Planet of the Apes, or Monkey Planet if you're from the UK. But we'll get into all that crazy next week when we get back into it. The Simian Flu Pandemic and De-Evolution Theory Part 2.
Until then, you know what to do. Follow us on socials at Alive Alive Pod and check out our Patreon at It's Alive Alive Pod for great shows like our Mini Monsters companion show, Real Monsters, and my Great Horrific History podcast, Playing with Bones, along with classic episodes of Behind the Mask and classic Real Monsters, along with early access to the whole week's Mini Monsters every Monday.
All that, and you get ad-free access to our main show and weekend update, all for just $5 a month, and that's on Patreon at It's Alive Alive Pod. But there's more. We are now with Spotify for podcasters, which means you can access this fucking Patreon stuff directly from a Spotify feed. You just go to It's Alive Alive Podcast Horrorverse, and you get everything there. You can unlock it there from Patreon and get all our fucking shows every week.
Sure can. And now the first 7 days are free, so it costs you nothing to go check it out.
We'll be back next week with more tales from the Horrorverse. It's Alive Alive Podcast, all the guts and gore with none of the guilt. See you all next time. Same Alive Alive time, same Horrorverse channel. Okay, love you. Bye-bye.
Hey,